The room went silent. Dozens of parents, teachers, and students sat in the school gym, their eyes locked on the stage where Ms. Carter, the fifth-grade teacher, stood gripping the microphone. Her face was calm, but her voice carried strength, the kind that made people sit up straighter. "You called her son a thug," Ms. Carter said, pointing at the parent in the front row. "You told him he didn't belong here because of the color of his skin." Gasps shot through the room. Parents leaned forward. Some whispered to one another. Others just stared in shock at the tall man in the front row, Mr. Reynolds, whose face was red and twisted with anger. "That's a lie," he barked, standing up, his voice booming across the gym. But Ms. Carter didn't flinch. She held up her phone. "I recorded it," she said. Every word. The entire room froze. The principal, who had been trying to calm everyone minutes earlier, now stayed quiet. All eyes turned to Ms. Carter. She pressed play. The sound echoed through the gym, Mr. Reynolds' voice clear as day. "Kids like him don't belong here. He's trouble. He's going to end up in jail just like the rest of them." A mother in the crowd covered her mouth. A father shook his head in disgust. A little boy squeezed his mom's hand tighter. When the recording ended, the silence was so heavy it felt like the walls themselves were listening. Then, slowly at first but growing louder, the room erupted in claps and cheers. Parents stood to their feet. Some shouted, "Yes." Others said, "That's right." The sound of applause bounced off the gym walls, louder than anything heard in that school meeting before. Ms. Carter's hand trembled slightly, but her eyes stayed locked on Mr. Reynolds. "This school will not be a place for hate," she said firmly. But before anyone could react further, Mr. Reynolds took one step forward, his fist clenched at his side, his jaw tight with rage. And that was when everything shifted. It hadn't started this way. The story began on a much quieter day, weeks before the school meeting. Ms. Carter had always loved teaching. For her, the classroom was more than a room with desks and chalkboards. It was a place where every child deserved to feel safe. She worked at Brookside Elementary, a small public school in a suburban neighborhood. The walls were covered with student drawings, colorful posters about kindness, and science projects that glowed under the hallway lights. Her class was a mix of students from different backgrounds. Some were shy, some were talkative, some were excellent at math, while others struggled with reading. But all of them had dreams, big ones. One of her brightest students was a boy named Malik Johnson. Malik was 10 years old, full of energy, with a love for science that surprised even adults. He would stay after class asking questions about planets, gravity, and inventions. "I'm going to be an astronaut one day," he often said, grinning so wide his dimples showed. Ms. Carter believed him. But not everyone did. Malik's mom, Denise Johnson, was a single mother who worked long hours as a nurse. She trusted the school to be a safe place for her son. But behind closed doors, not everyone saw Malik for the curious, smart boy he was. Some parents whispered things about him. Some teachers overlooked his raised hand. And one parent in particular, Mr. Reynolds, had taken his dislike for Malik too far. It began with stares. Whenever Malik walked past, Mr. Reynolds would glare at him like he didn't belong. Then came the comments, sharp, cruel words spoken loud enough for Malik to hear but quiet enough that teachers couldn't always catch. "You should go back to where you came from. Troublemakers like you ruin schools. Bet your dad's in jail." Malik never told Ms. Carter at first. He held the pain inside, his smile a little dimmer each day. But kids notice things, and soon, his classmates did too. "Why does that man hate you?" a girl named Emily asked Malik one afternoon. Malik just shrugged, but Ms. Carter saw the hurt in his eyes. The breaking point came one afternoon during pickup time. Parents were waiting outside while kids streamed out. Malik waved goodbye to Ms. Carter and started toward his mom's car. That's when Mr. Reynolds stepped in front of him. "You think you're smart, huh?" Mr. Reynolds sneered, his voice low but venomous. "You're nothing but a thug in training. You'll end up in handcuffs. Mark my words." Malik froze. His backpack slipped from his shoulder and thudded against the pavement. Other kids nearby stared, too scared to move. But what Mr. Reynolds didn't know was that Ms. Carter had walked outside just in time to hear those words. Her heart dropped. Her face went pale. She wanted to scream, but she knew yelling wouldn't solve it. Instead, she did something smarter. She quietly reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and pressed record. That moment was the seed that grew into the explosion at the school meeting weeks later. But before they reached that day, things got even more complicated. The next morning, Malik didn't want to come to school. He sat at his kitchen table, pushing his cereal around with his spoon. "Mom," he whispered, "maybe I should stay home today." Denise frowned. "Why, baby?" Malik hesitated, then shook his head. "Never mind." But Denise wasn't blind. She saw the heaviness in his eyes. She knew something was wrong. That evening, when Ms. Carter called to check in, Denise finally learned the truth. "He said that." Denise's voice cracked over the phone. "He said my son would end up in jail?" "Yes," Ms. Carter said softly. "I heard it myself. I have the proof." There was silence on the line, then Denise whispered, "We can't let this slide." That's when Ms. Carter decided to bring it to the school board meeting. She knew it wouldn't be easy. She knew Mr. Reynolds was loud, aggressive, and had friends among the parents. But she also knew silence was dangerous. If she stayed quiet, Malik and other kids would keep suffering. The night of the meeting came fast. The gym was packed. Parents filled the foldable chairs, the smell of coffee and paper drifting through the air. The principal tried to keep the tone calm, talking about budgets and after-school programs. But the tension was already there. When Mr. Reynolds raised his hand to speak, Ms. Carter's stomach tightened. He stood tall, his voice booming. "This school has a problem," he declared. "Some kids don't belong here. They're dragging down the rest of our students." Gasps scattered through the crowd. A few parents nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably. Malik, sitting in the back with his mom, lowered his head. And that was the moment Ms. Carter stood. Her heart pounded in her chest as she walked to the microphone. Her palms were sweaty, but her voice, when she spoke, carried strength. "This isn't about test scores or discipline," she said. "This is about racism. And I'm not going to let it hide in this school." The room fell quiet. Then she played the recording. And just like that, the room exploded. Parents rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, shouting, "Yes, and that's the truth." The sound swallowed the gym whole. Malik's mom cried silently, holding her son tight. But as the applause echoed, Mr. Reynolds stepped forward, his eyes dark with fury. His hand curled into a fist. And in that instant, something happened that no one in the room could have expected. Mr. Reynolds' footsteps echoed on the wooden floor of the gym as he moved closer to the stage. His face was red, his nostrils flared, and his fists were so tight the veins bulged in his arms. Parents who had been clapping only moments ago now froze in their seat. The cheering stopped like someone had pressed a button. "Turn that thing off!" Mr. Reynolds shouted, pointing a trembling finger at Ms. Carter. "You don't know what you're talking about. You think you can embarrass me in front of everyone." His voice shook the room. A few parents gasped. Some even tried to pull their kids closer, like they were protecting them from his anger. Ms. Carter stood her ground. Her hands trembled behind the microphone, but her eyes didn't move away from his. "What you said to Malik was wrong," she said firmly. "And the whole school deserves to know it." Mr. Reynolds took another step forward. His shoes slammed against the floor so hard the sound bounced off the gym walls. The principal, Mr. Thomas, quickly jumped from his chair. "That's enough, Mr. Reynolds," Mr. Thomas shouted, stepping between him and Miss Carter. His voice cracked with fear, but he held out his hands like a shield. The tension was so thick you could feel it in the air. Everyone sat stiff, watching, waiting, wondering what would happen if Mr. Reynolds kept moving. Then, Malik's mother, Denise, suddenly stood up from the back of the gym. She didn't shout. She didn't wave her arms. She simply walked forward, her heels clicking slowly, her face calm but strong. "You may scare others, but you don't scare me," she said loudly, her voice clear as glass. The room went dead silent again. For a moment, Mr. Reynolds froze. His eyes flicked toward Denise. Something about the calm way she stared at him seemed to hit him harder than all the clapping and shouting had before. He stopped moving forward, though his fists were still tight. Then, finally, he turned and stormed back to his seat, muttering under his breath. The gym released a collective breath. Parents whispered nervously. Kids peeked from behind their parents' arms. But the damage was already done. Ms. Carter's recording had exposed him. The applause had humiliated him. And everyone knew Mr. Reynolds wasn't the type of man to sit quietly and accept shame. The meeting continued, but the energy in the room was heavy. Parents whispered to one another, some arguing in low voices. One mother said, "I can't believe he said that about a child." Another father muttered, "This is going to blow up bigger than just this school." Ms. Carter sat back down, her heart still racing from the confrontation. Malik and his mom slipped her small smiles from across the room, and she gave them one in return. But deep inside, she knew this wasn't over. When the meeting ended, parents began to gather their coats and bags. Kids tugged at their parents' hands, ready to go home. The smell of strong coffee still lingered in the air, but the excitement had shifted into unease. As Miss Carter packed her things, she felt a shadow fall over her desk. She looked up. It was Mr. Reynolds. His face was calm now, too calm. His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You think you're a hero now," he whispered so low only she could hear. "You're not. You don't know who you're messing with." Miss Carter's stomach knotted. She didn't answer. She just zipped her bag and walked away, her heart pounding faster with each step. Denise was waiting by the door. "He said something, didn't he?" she asked softly. Miss Carter nodded, her throat tight. "We can't let him scare us," Denise said. Her eyes glimmered with both worry and courage. "If we back down, he wins." Ms. Carter knew she was right. But fear was a heavy weight, and it followed her all the way home that night. The next morning, things seemed calmer. The sun was bright, kids laughed in the hallways, and Malik even smiled when he walked into class. For a moment, Ms. Carter allowed herself to believe the worst was behind them. But during recess, as the children played outside, she noticed something strange. A group of parents were standing by the fence, parents who usually didn't come during school hours. She recognized them instantly. They were Mr. Reynolds' friends. They weren't watching their kids. They were watching her. Her stomach twisted. She tried to focus on the children's laughter, the sound of basketballs bouncing, the squeals of kids chasing one another. But the eyes of those parents stayed fixed on her like shadows that wouldn't leave. When recess ended, she rushed back inside, but the feeling of being watched lingered. That evening, Ms. Carter sat at her kitchen table with her phone buzzing non-stop. Her email inbox was filled with messages from parents, some thanking her, others furious. One message made her chest tighten. "Teachers like you make schools unsafe. If you don't like it here, leave." Her hands shook as she read it. But then another message popped up. "Thank you for standing up for Malik. My son was bullied too, and I never had the courage to speak. You did. You gave us all hope." The messages were like waves, fear crashing against her, then hope pulling her back to her feet. She didn't know which side would win. The next school day, Miss Carter found something taped to her classroom door. A piece of paper, written in thick black marker. "Snitches pay." Her breath caught in her throat. She quickly tore it down before the children saw, but her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped it. She stuffed it into her bag, trying to steady her breathing before the students arrived. When Malik walked in, smiling with his homework in his hand, she forced herself to smile back. She couldn't let him see her fear. But inside, she knew this was no longer just about one recording. This was about safety, for her, for Malik, and maybe even for the whole school. That night, the school board announced there would be a special follow-up meeting to address the incident. News had spread. Local reporters wanted to cover it. Parents were arguing online. Some defended Ms. Carter, others defended Mr. Reynolds. The school was becoming the center of a storm. Denise called Ms. Carter late that night. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. Ms. Carter hesitated. "I don't know. What if it gets worse?" Denise's voice was steady. "Then we make it worse for him, not us. We're not backing down." Ms. Carter sat in silence, her chest tight. And then, the day of the special meeting came. The gym was more crowded than before. Cameras flashed. Reporters whispered to one another. The air buzzed with tension like a storm waiting to break. Ms. Carter sat near the front, her hands pressed together, her mind racing. She could feel dozens of eyes on her. Malik sat in the back with his mom again, his little face serious. When the meeting began, Mr. Reynolds stood up almost immediately. His voice was calm this time, but his words were sharp as knives. "This teacher is lying," he said, pointing at Miss Carter. "She hates this school. She wants to make it about race because she can't handle discipline. That's the real problem here." Some parents nodded. Others shook their heads angrily. Reporters scribbled notes. Ms. Carter could feel the heat rising in her chest. She wanted to shout back. She wanted to stand up right then and there. But before she could, Mr. Reynolds said something that made the whole gym gasp. "This boy doesn't belong here," he said loudly, pointing straight at Malik. "He should be expelled before he ruins the rest of our kids." The words cut through the room like a blade. Malik's eyes went wide. Denise jumped to her feet. Parents erupted, some shouting at Mr. Reynolds, others clapping for him. The gym turned into chaos. And Ms. Carter, her heart pounding, knew she had to act fast. She stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, and grabbed the microphone. But before she could speak, something shocking happened that no one had seen coming. The gym was chaos. Parents were shouting, kids were crying, and reporters were scribbling so fast their pens nearly tore the paper. The principal banged his gavel against the table, yelling, "Order! Order, please!" But his voice was drowned out by the storm. Malik sat frozen in the back, his small hands gripping the edge of his chair. His mom wrapped her arm around him, her body trembling with anger. Ms. Carter gripped the microphone so tight her knuckles turned white. "You do not get to say that about a child," she said, her voice booming louder than she thought possible. But Mr. Reynolds wasn't backing down. He stood tall, his chin raised like he was proud of what he'd said. "I'm only speaking the truth," he barked. "He doesn't belong here. Look at the statistics. Kids like him." "Enough!" Miss Carter's voice cracked through the air like lightning. The gym fell silent. Even Mr. Reynolds froze, blinking in shock at the force of her tone. "Malik is one of the brightest students I've ever taught," Miss Carter said firmly, her eyes locked on his. "He's kind, hard-working, and curious. He's going to do great things in this world, whether you believe it or not. And if you think your hate will stop him, you're wrong." Some parents clapped immediately. Others shouted in agreement. Malik's mom closed her eyes, holding her son tighter. But just as hope began to fill the room again, Mr. Reynolds sneered. "You're just playing the race card," he snapped. "You're twisting everything to make me look bad. But I'm not the only one who feels this way." And that's when it happened. 3 other parents stood up from the crowd. Ms. Carter's stomach dropped. One of them, a woman with sharp eyes and folded arms, said loudly, "He's right. We've been too quiet about this. These kids are holding our children back." Gasps shot through the gym. Malik's face crumpled, his small shoulders sinking. Denise's mouth opened in shock, her body shaking with fury. Ms. Carter felt her legs weaken. She had expected to fight one man, not a group. "Are you serious?" shouted a father from the other side of the gym. "That boy has better grades than half the kids in here." "It's not about grades," the woman snapped back. "It's about what's right for our community." The gym erupted again. Parents yelled at each other, their voices colliding in a storm of noise. The principal pounded his gavel so hard the handle cracked, but no one listened. In the chaos, Malik whispered to his mom, his voice breaking, "Why do they hate me so much?" Denise's eyes filled with tears, but she kissed his forehead and whispered back, "Because they're afraid of what they don't understand. But you, baby, you're stronger than their fear." The next few days at school were tense. The story of the meeting spread fast. Local news stations ran clips of Ms. Carter's speech. Social media was buzzing. Some people praised her for standing up. Others attacked her, calling her divisive and dangerous. Ms. Carter could feel the tension in the hallways. Teachers whispered when she passed. Some parents avoided her, while others gave her secret nods of support. The students, though, were the hardest part. Some of Malik's classmates treated him differently. A few kids, repeating things they heard at home, muttered cruel words under their breath. Troublemaker. Thug. Jailboy. Each word was a dagger. Malik tried to hold his head high, but Ms. Carter saw the sadness in his eyes. One afternoon, she found him sitting alone on the swings during recess. "Hey, astronaut," she said gently, sitting beside him. Malik kicked the dirt with his shoe. "Ms. Carter, maybe I should just leave this school." Her chest tightened. "Why would you say that?" "Because they don't want me here," he whispered. "No matter what I do, they'll always see me the same." Ms. Carter swallowed hard, fighting the lump in her throat. She wanted to tell him the world was fair, that people would see him for who he was. But she knew that wasn't always true. Instead, she said, "Malik, you shine too bright for their darkness to win. You hear me? You belong here. And I'll fight every day to make sure you stay." For the first time that week, Malik smiled again. Just a little, but enough to give her hope. But things weren't getting easier. Later that week, Ms. Carter walked to her car in the school parking lot and froze. Her tires were slashed. Her heart pounded as she looked around the empty lot. No one was there, but deep inside, she knew who was behind it. The next morning, Denise stormed into the principal's office. "This has gone too far," she shouted. "They're threatening teachers now. What's next, our children?" The principal sighed, rubbing his forehead. "We're doing everything we can." "No," Denise snapped. "You're doing everything to stay comfortable. That's not enough." Her voice shook the room. Even Ms. Carter, standing beside her, felt chills. The principal promised to review the situation, but neither of them believed him. The following week brought the biggest shock yet. The school announced another meeting, this time with the superintendent present. Reporters filled the gym. TV cameras pointed at the stage. Everyone knew this wasn't just about one parent anymore. It was about whether racism would be tolerated in their community. Ms. Carter sat in the front row, her palms sweating. Malik and his mom were just a few seats away. The superintendent, a tall man with silver hair and a calm voice, began the meeting. "We're here today to address serious concerns raised by recent events at Brookside Elementary," he said. "This school must be a safe place for all students." Mr. Reynolds stood again, his voice loud and confident. "This is ridiculous," he said. "We're being silenced just for speaking the truth. If we can't say what we think about the kind of kids ruining our schools, then what's the point of having meetings at all?" The superintendent frowned. "Mr. Reynolds, what you said about Malik was unacceptable." "Unacceptable?" Mr. Reynolds interrupted. "I'll show you what's unacceptable." And before anyone could stop him, he pulled a stack of papers from his bag and held them high. "These are complaints from parents who agree with me." Gasps filled the room. Reporters leaned forward, cameras flashing. Ms. Carter's eyes widened. Were those real? Had other parents actually signed something against Malik? The superintendent reached for the papers, but Mr. Reynolds yanked them back. "We're not the minority here," he barked. "We're the ones protecting our children." The gym was seconds away from exploding into chaos again, when suddenly, a voice rang out from the back. "Read them out loud, then." Everyone turned. It was Denise. She stood tall, her arms crossed, her eyes blazing. "Go ahead," she said. "Let the world hear the kind of parents you really are." The gym went dead silent. All eyes swung back to Mr. Reynolds, who hesitated, his lips pressed tight. Reporters raised their cameras higher, ready to capture whatever happened next. Parents held their breath. Miss Carter's heart pounded so loud she could hear it in her ears. Would he actually read the papers? Or was it all a bluff? Mr. Reynolds' hands trembled as he unfolded the first page. He opened his mouth to read. And in that moment, something happened that no one in the room could have predicted. Mr. Reynolds' voice trembled slightly as he unfolded the first page. The gym was silent, so silent that even the creak of the folding chairs echoed like thunder. Parents leaned forward, reporters raised their microphones, and Malik sat clutching his mother's hand so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Complaint number 1, Mr. Reynolds said loudly, puffing out his chest as if to sound confident. "Malik Johnson is disruptive in class and a bad influence on other children." Gasps spread across the gym. "That's a lie," Malik blurted, jumping to his feet before his mother could stop him. His small voice cracked, but it was strong. "I always do my work. I never cause trouble." Denise pulled him close, but the damage was done. The room erupted again. Some parents shouted, "Sit down." Others said, "Let the boy speak." Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashing. Ms. Carter stood quickly. "This is outrageous," she said firmly into the microphone. "I'm his teacher. Malik is one of the best students in this school. He has never been disruptive. That so-called complaint is false." But Mr. Reynolds only smirked and waved the paper. "There's more," he said. "Complaint number 2. Malik often acts aggressively toward other students." Parents gasped again. A few turned to stare at Malik as if seeing him differently. "That's not true," Ms. Carter said, her voice sharper now. "Malik is respectful and kind. He helps his classmates. I've never once seen him act aggressively." Mr. Reynolds flipped the page with exaggerated slowness. "Complaint number 3. Stop hiding behind fake papers." Denise suddenly shouted, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. She rose to her feet, her face blazing with fury. "If those are real, then tell us who signed them. Tell us which parents put their names on lies about my son." The crowd hushed again. All eyes locked on Mr. Reynolds. Reporters leaned in closer, waiting. For the first time, Mr. Reynolds hesitated. He licked his lips, glanced around the room, then said, "They wanted to stay anonymous." A murmur spread. Parents whispered to each other. Some frowned, others looked confused. Denise took a step forward. "Anonymous? That's because no one signed them. You made them up, didn't you?" Mr. Reynolds' face flushed red. "I did not," he barked. "You think I'd waste my time?" "Then show us the signatures," Denise pressed. Her voice was steady, unshaken. "Right here, right now." The superintendent nodded slowly. "She's right, Mr. Reynolds. If you're presenting official complaints, we need to see names." All the color drained from Mr. Reynolds' face. He shuffled the papers in his hands, his eyes darting like a trapped animal. Finally, Ms. Carter spoke up. "You forged them, didn't you?" Gasps rippled across the gym. "No," Mr. Reynolds shouted, but his voice cracked. His hands trembled, the papers shaking like leaves in the wind. Denise's voice thundered. "You made this all up just to try and get rid of my son. To destroy a child." The gym exploded with noise. Some parents shouted at Mr. Reynolds, calling him a liar. Others sat in stunned silence. Reporters rushed forward, snapping photos, recording every second. The superintendent slammed his hand on the table. "Mr. Reynolds, if these papers are falsified, there will be consequences." But Mr. Reynolds only grew angrier. He threw the papers down, his voice booming over the crowd. "You're all blind. You don't see what's happening. People like her," he pointed at Denise, his face twisted, "and people like him," he jabbed a finger toward Malik, "are changing our schools, our neighborhoods, our country." The words hung in the air like poison. The room fell silent. Even the reporters stopped writing. Then, slowly, one parent in the front row stood. A tall man in a blue shirt. "That's enough," he said, his voice firm. "We won't let you spew hate at a child." Another parent stood. Then another. Soon, half the room was standing, their faces set with anger, but this time not at Miss Carter, not at Malik, but at Mr. Reynolds. The sound of clapping began again, small at first but growing louder and louder until it filled the gym. Parents stomped their feet, cheered, and shouted, "Enough! Enough!" Miss Carter felt tears prick her eyes. For the first time, she saw hope blooming stronger than fear. But then, Mr. Reynolds snapped. His face turned red, his eyes wild. He lunged forward, knocking over a chair, and shouted at the top of his lungs, "You'll regret this! All of you!" Gasps rang out as he stormed toward the exit, pushing past parents and reporters. The doors slammed shut behind him with a bang so loud it shook the gym. The applause died. The cheers faded. The only sound left was the heavy breathing of frightened parents and children. The superintendent cleared his throat, but his voice shook. This situation has gone beyond what we expected." He looked at Ms. Carter, then at Denise and Malik. "We need to talk about protection. For both staff and students." Ms. Carter's heart dropped. Protection? Was this really what it had come to? Malik tugged on his mom's sleeve, his little voice barely a whisper. "Mom, am I safe?" Denise pulled him close, but she couldn't answer. Her silence was louder than any word. That night, Miss Carter lay awake, her mind replaying the scene again and again. Mr. Reynolds' twisted face, his threats, his storming out, it haunted her. She knew this wasn't over. And she was right. The next morning, before school even began, the janitor found something spray-painted across the front wall of the building. Big, black letters dripping with fresh paint. "Get rid of them or else." The sight froze Miss Carter in her tracks. And just like that, the fight reached a whole new level. The words were ugly, sharp, and hateful. "Get rid of them or else." Spray-painted across the front wall of Brookside Elementary, the black letters dripped down like they were bleeding. Teachers, students, and parents arriving that morning froze in their tracks. Some covered their children's eyes. Others just stood in shock. Miss Carter felt her stomach twist. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. She turned and saw Malik clutching his mother's hand, his face pale. "Why would someone do that?" he whispered. Denise knelt beside him, her voice shaky but steady. "Because they're scared of you, baby. They see your light, and it makes their darkness show." The principal rushed outside, his face pale as he shouted for everyone to move back. Police cars arrived minutes later, their flashing lights reflecting against the hateful word. Officers snapped pictures, took notes, and taped off the area with bright yellow tape. Reporters swarmed the scene. Cameras pointed at the wall. Microphones shoved toward anyone willing to speak. The whole town would soon see what had been written on the school. "This is a hate crime," one officer said firmly, shaking his head. But to Malik, it wasn't just crime, it was personal. He lowered his head, fighting back tears. Inside the school, the atmosphere was heavy. Kids whispered in the hallways. Teachers huddled in corners, their voices low. Parents called the office non-stop, demanding answers. In her classroom, Ms. Carter tried to stay strong. She put on a smile for her students, but her hands shook as she handed out worksheets. She knew they could sense her fear. Children always could. During lunch, Malik sat at the end of the table, his food untouched. Emily, his friend, slid into the seat beside him. "Don't listen to them," she said softly. "You're smart. You're kind. You don't deserve this." Malik gave her a weak smile, but his eyes stayed down. "It doesn't matter. They'll always see me the same." Emily frowned. "Not everyone." "I see you. Miss Carter sees you. Your mom sees you. Lots of us do." Her words were simple, but they lit a tiny spark in Malik's chest. A spark he desperately needed. That afternoon, Ms. Carter was called into the principal's office. Denise was already there, her arms crossed, her face hard as stone. The superintendent sat beside them, his expression grim. "This has escalated beyond control," the superintendent said. "The vandalism, the threats, the division in the community, it's no longer safe." Denise leaned forward. "So what are you going to do about it?" The superintendent sighed. "We're considering suspending Mr. Reynolds' children from school until this situation calms down." Ms. Carter blinked. "Suspending his children? What did they do?" "They didn't do anything," the superintendent admitted, "but it may stop Mr. Reynolds from stirring things further." Denise slammed her hand on the table. "That's not justice. That's punishment for the wrong people. His kids aren't the problem, he is." The room shook with her words. Even Ms. Carter felt chills. "Then what do you suggest?" the superintendent asked quietly. Denise's eyes burned like fire. "Expose him. Fire him from the PTA board. Ban him from school property. Make it clear this school will not be his playground for hate." The superintendent hesitated. "That could make things worse." "No," Denise said firmly. "Ignoring it makes things worse." The silence in the room was heavy. Finally, the superintendent nodded slowly. "We'll hold one final meeting. This time, everything will be decided publicly." News of the final meeting spread like wildfire. Flyers went up. Posts flooded social media. Local news stations promised live coverage. Everyone in town seemed to have an opinion. Some demanded justice for Malik. Others claimed Mr. Reynolds was being targeted unfairly. The night of the meeting, the gym was more packed than ever before. Parents filled every seat. Reporters lined the walls. Police officers stood by the doors, their presence a reminder of the vandalism. Ms. Carter sat near the front, her stomach in knots. Denise and Malik sat beside her, holding hands tightly. The principal and superintendent sat on stage, microphones ready. Then, the doors burst open. Mr. Reynolds walked in. The crowd shifted immediately. Some parents whispered, others glared. He strode confidently to the front row, his jaw set, his eyes burning. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, a group of parents followed, his supporters. They carried signs that read, "Protect our kids. Stop dividing our school. No more race games." Gasps filled the gym. Some parents booed. Others clapped. The tension was electric, snapping through the air like a storm ready to break. Ms. Carter's chest tightened. This was no longer just a school issue, it had become a battle line in the community. The superintendent tapped the microphone. "Please, everyone, remain calm. Tonight, we will address the future of this school and how we move forward." But calm was impossible. Mr. Reynolds shot to his feet before the superintendent could finish. "We won't be silenced," he shouted. "We won't let outsiders change our school." His supporters roared in agreement, their voices echoing off the gym walls. Denise stood immediately. "Outsiders? My son was born here. He belongs here just as much as yours." Cheers erupted from the other half of the room. The gym was split, two sides shouting across the floor, their voices colliding like waves crashing against each other. Ms. Carter's heart pounded. She could see Malik shrinking in his chair, covering his ears against the noise. She couldn't let this continue. She stood, her voice cutting through the chaos. "This is about a child. A 10-year-old boy who deserves to feel safe in his own school. Not politics, not fear, not hate, just safety and love." Some parents clapped. Others shouted back angrily. Reporters swarmed closer, cameras zooming in on every face, every word. Then, one of Mr. Reynolds' supporters suddenly pointed at Malik and yelled, "He doesn't belong here." The words echoed like a gunshot. The gym froze. Malik's face crumpled, tears spilling down his cheeks. Denise wrapped her arms around him, fury radiating from her body. And before anyone could react, Ms. Carter grabbed the microphone, her voice trembling but powerful. "If you think a child doesn't belong here because of his skin color," she said, "then maybe you don't belong here." The gym exploded. Half the room roared with applause, the other half erupted with boos. Police officers stepped forward, trying to calm the crowd. But in the middle of the chaos, Mr. Reynolds climbed onto his chair, towering over the crowd, and shouted with a voice so loud it shook the rafters. "If they stay, we leave." The words hit the gym like an earthquake. Gasps, shouts, cheers, boos. The room fractured in an instant, split down the middle. Parents screamed at each other, pointing fingers, stomping feet. Ms. Carter gripped the microphone, her heart pounding like a drum. She knew this was the breaking point. The school, and maybe the whole town, was about to change forever. And then, through the chaos, Malik whispered the words that silenced his mother and Miss Carter both. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I should just leave." The noise of the gym faded into a blur. Miss Carter froze, her breath caught in her chest. Denise's face crumpled in pain. Those words, soft and broken, were more powerful than any shout. The fight had reached Malik's heart. And now, everything was on the line. The gym was louder than thunder. Parents screamed. Teachers shouted. Reporters jostled for the best view. Police tried to calm the chaos, but nothing worked. And yet, through it all, one soft voice cut deeper than any yell. "Maybe they're right," Malik whispered. "Maybe I should just leave." Denise's breath caught in her throat. Tears filled her eyes. She pulled her son close, holding him like she might lose him if she let go. "No, baby," she said, her voice cracking. "Don't you dare believe that." But Malik's small shoulders trembled. "They hate me, Mama. They don't want me here." Ms. Carter's heart shattered. She had fought so hard, meetings, speeches, late nights of planning, but now the battle had reached Malik's soul. And if he lost hope, everything they had fought for would mean nothing. She stepped forward, snatched the microphone, and spoke with a voice that burned through the noise. "Enough!" The gym fell silent. Every eye turned to her. "Do you hear yourselves?" Ms. Carter said, her voice trembling but strong. "You are grown adults, shouting in front of children. And why? Because of one boy's skin color. A 10-year-old boy. A child who should be learning, laughing, and feeling safe. Instead, he's standing here wondering if he belongs in his own school." She turned toward Malik, her eyes soft. "You do belong. Don't you ever think otherwise. This is your school. This is your town. And no one, not hate, not fear, not ignorance, will take that from you." The crowd was split. Some clapped loudly, rising to their feet. Others shook their heads, booing and muttering under their breath. Mr. Reynolds stood, his face red with rage. "This is ridiculous. You're making him a victim when he's not. You're dividing us." Denise shot to her feet, her voice like fire. "No, you divided us when you called my son a problem. When you spread lies. When you painted that wall. Don't you dare stand here and pretend you care about unity." Gasps rippled through the crowd. All eyes snapped to Reynolds. He froze. "How do you know I painted that wall?" he demanded, his voice shaking. The principal stood then, holding up a folder. "Because the police found proof." The gym erupted again, gasps, shouts, murmurs. "Inside this folder," the principal continued, "is surveillance footage from a nearby store's camera. It shows Mr. Reynolds and two others spray painting our school wall in the middle of the night." Reporters surged forward, their cameras flashing like lightning. Reynolds' face went pale. For the first time, he looked shaken. His supporters shifted uncomfortably, whispering among themselves. One mother stood and shouted, "Is that true? Did you really do it?" Reynolds stammered, his voice cracking. I was just..." But before he could finish, the principal's voice boomed. "You terrorized children. You divided parents. You nearly destroyed this school. And for what? To push your hate." Two police officers stepped forward. One spoke firmly. "Mr. Reynolds, you are under arrest for vandalism, harassment, and hate crimes." The crowd gasped. Some cheered. Some cried out in shock. Reynolds' face twisted in fury. "This isn't over," he screamed as the officers grabbed his arms. "You'll regret this. All of you." But his words were drowned by the sound of applause, cheers, and shouts of relief. The gym was buzzing with energy, but for Malik, everything slowed. He watched as Reynolds was handcuffed and dragged away. For the first time in weeks, the heavy weight on his chest lifted. He turned to Miss Carter, tears streaming down his face. "He can't hurt us anymore?" Ms. Carter knelt in front of him, her own eyes wet. "No, sweetheart. Not anymore." Denise hugged her son so tightly he could barely breathe. "See, baby? You belong here. They tried to break us, but we're still standing." The superintendent stepped up to the microphone. "From this day forward, Brookside Elementary will not tolerate hate. We will add new programs, new lessons, and new voices to make sure every child feels safe. This will never happen again." The crowd erupted with applause. Even those who had once stayed silent now stood, clapping and cheering. Malik wiped his tears, a small smile creeping across his face. For the first time, he felt seen, not as a problem, not as an outsider, but as a boy who mattered. The next morning, the hateful words were gone from the school wall. In their place was a giant mural, painted by students, teachers, and parents together. It read in bright, bold letters, "Every child belongs." Around the words were colorful handprints of all sizes, shapes, and colors: red, blue, green, brown, black, white. A rainbow of unity. Malik pressed his hand into blue paint and left his mark in the center of the mural. As he stepped back, Ms. Carter smiled. "That's your proof. No one can erase this." Denise kissed the top of his head. "And no one can erase you." But as beautiful as the mural was, not everyone celebrated. Across town, Reynolds' supporters whispered in secret. Some still clung to his lies. Others plotted quietly, their eyes sharp with resentment. The fight wasn't over, not completely. But Malik didn't care. Not anymore. Because now, he knew the truth. He belonged. And nothing, no words, no lies, no hate, could ever take that away again. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because every new video we share brings the truth to light. Don't stop here, keep watching and stand with us against racism.